Hey, welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Build Your Own Web Server Fun, and also how to install Internet Information Services IIS 7.0, which is Microsoft's website service, in two different flavors. So in this video, we're going to talk about the two different flavors of website capabilities in Server 2008. I'm going to talk to you about application servers versus web servers and which one you should select. Now, keep in mind that our whole project here for Globomantics, we're going to be installing SharePoint services. So I'm going to tell you which one you need for that. But then I'm also going to talk to you about how to get SharePoint installed. So we're going to be covering quite a bit of ground here underneath each of these two topics. So we better go ahead and get started. Here's what we have built so far. And this is nothing new to you, but in this video, we're going to be focusing our energies on building the SharePoint web services server. And so I'm going to show you how to set it up basically from ground up. That's really what we're going to be doing in this one. Now remember, in the last video we installed Server 2008 in a virtual machine, and I haven't touched it since we left that video. So whenever we see that virtual machine, it's going to be exactly where we left it. All right. So let's talk about, before we get into setting up that server, we know that we need to set up SharePoint services, right? So we need to get that guy set. And there's two web type server roles that are available, web server and application server. So let's talk about which one you should choose. And here's what it boils down to, okay? A web server is fairly basic. I mean, it's basically going to provide you with the core web services of IIS 7. So you can host static HTML pages, ASP pages. If you install the Fast CGI plugin that's available from Microsoft, you can also install PHP pages. So it's a pretty solid web server option, but it does have some limitations. Now, if you need something that is super heavy duty, then we're going to be looking at the application server. All right. Now, the application server has a whole lot more capabilities than just your basic core web server. Now, of course, you're already starting to think, well, why wouldn't I just always install application server? Well, let me go ahead and tell you why here. First of all, if you're going to be doing SharePoint, all right, you need to have the application server role for SharePoint installation, period, all right? So if that's what your goal is, then you got to have that, okay? But here's the other side of it. The web server role is really good if all you have is just a basic website. Or maybe you have an ASP or PHP content management system, a dynamic website, if you will, that might require a database on the back end. Now, of course, you'll need to install the database somewhere on a separate server or on that server, but regardless, the web server role is a good all-purpose server, all right, if you're hosting a website. But again, it does have its limitations, so let me give you kind of an even easier way to think about it. Think application server more for heavy-duty internal use on your premises and probably not outside. You might have people VPNing in or something like that. But application server is really more for internal use than external use, although you can use it for an external SharePoint site if that's what you're going to be building. But it's really more geared for internal use overall, all right? Now, for the web server role, think web server role if you're going to be hosting external sites, okay? Now, I also want to kind of bring in a caveat for this. If you're going to be hosting a website for the external outside world to get to, you're probably going to need to publish, you're probably going to want to publish that external website using Microsoft's IIS server, okay, which I know is a whole separate product and a whole different topic for a whole different day. But IIS server also has firewall capabilities and a lot of very cool things. It's also pretty easy to use overall, too. So if you're going to be hosting websites for the outside world or the public to get to, that's something that you want to keep in mind for your server. Now, that's not really what we're doing with Globomantics here, okay? For Globomantics, we're going to be doing SharePoint services for the inside of our network. Well, all of our on-site employees and, of course, if our off-site employees have VPN access, they'll be able to get to it and whatnot. But for Globomantics, we're really focused on getting a box up for SharePoint services. All right, so now we've kind of discussed which one we're going to select. I'm going to go ahead and move you now on over to the server. I'm going to show you exactly how to set up the application server role. And you know what? No matter whether you're installing the web server role or application server role, it's pretty much the same process. And if you're already familiar with installing server roles, this is going to be a piece of cake. All right, so let's bounce on over there and let's get started with that. All right, so here we are back over on a Hyper-V machine, and just so you know, we're still remote desktoped in. And what I need to do is I need to get this server finished setting up here, and it's really a real simple thing. Remember, I told you that I have not touched this particular box since we installed it in the last video. I want you to see everything that I'm doing all the way through. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and leave the options as they are. Now at this point, I should really put in the product key, but I'm not going to do that for the demonstration here. I'm just going to go ahead and click next. And by the way, you see that I'm not moving my mouse. Again, I actually have to use my keyboard until I get the operating system fully installed and I can install integration services as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just finish this up here real quick, pressing the space bar to put a check mark in I accept the license terms, pressing the tab key to go to next, and hitting the enter key. All right, now I need to put in a computer name here, so let's do Web1, and then we'll put in here Globo. All right, so we have a good name for it, and pressing the enter key to hit start. And now it's going to finish up doing the rest of the configuration tasks. It is going to take just a little bit to finish this up, so I'm going to pause the video while it's doing its thing, and I'll be right back as soon as it's done. All right, so it's done finishing its initial configuration. Didn't take very long, actually only a couple of minutes here. So now I'm going to go ahead and press the enter key to go ahead and go into the OK box here. And now I'm going to go ahead and put in a basic password real quick and set the password for the local administrator for this machine. Now this machine is not currently joined to the domain yet. So yeah, we're going to have to do all of that kind of stuff. At least this particular round. And by the way, for our future machines, I'm going to go ahead and do this off screen so you don't have to see me set up every single machine because, well, you know, by now you should know how to do your basic configuration. But I'll go through it one more time just in case. All right, and there we go. Okay. So now let's go ahead and scroll down here so we can see the full screen table. Let's go ahead and let's take this guy full screen as soon as we install our integration services. So we're going to go to Action menu here on the virtual machine window here and select Insert Integration Services Setup Disk. And again, what this is going to allow us to do is not have to only use the keyboard all the time. We're also going to be able to use the mouse inside of the remote desktop session that I'm using to control this particular machine. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and press the enter key to actually install the integration services setup here. Now what's going to happen is it's going to actually install software onto this operating system in the virtual machine. Oh, it's telling me a previous installation of Hyper-V integration services has been detected. Yeah, well, let's find out here. Is it actually there? No. It's telling me the mouse not captured in a remote desktop session. Okay, so what that means, I'm going to go ahead and press the enter key to tell OK so that it can install. And it's really installing for the first time. I don't know really why it's telling me that it found a previous installation for that. Now what this is going to do after it installs is it's going to prompt me to restart the virtual machine. So I'm going to go ahead and have to do that here. Now I want you to remember though that you're going to have to do this with every single virtual machine that you create, okay? Do you have to have the Hyper-V integration services installed? Yes. It's flat out yes, right off the gate. You have to have integration services set up, not only so that you can use the mouse inside of a remote desktop window like what I'm doing here, but also in order to allow the machine to connect to the outside world. It's vital, okay? You gotta have it in there. All right, so while this guy is installing, again, I am going to be restarting this machine, so I'm going to pause this video right now. Allow this thing to finish installation and restart the machine, and as soon as that's complete, I'll be right back. All right, so our machine has successfully started. Let's go ahead and let's do a Control-Alt-Delete to log in here. And real quick, we'll just get logged in. And let's see, when we click on the machine with our mouse, hey, look, no message. Neat. All right, let's go ahead and expand this window now to full screen. So we're really kind of looking at a remote desktop window instead of a remote desktop window, if you will. At least that's what it looks like, doesn't it? All right, so now I can go ahead and I can click on anything that I like, just like I would normally in a remote desktop session. All right, so let's go ahead and let's do some quick networking configuration here for our web server. We'll just do some quick networking properties here. Let's go ahead and let's give ourselves a quick IP address. And we'll do 195.168.5.15. Subnet mask is configured for us automatically, and then the default gateway is 168.5.1, which is the address of our router. And my preferred DNS server is 168.5.2. There we go. All right, I'll tell that guy OK, and OK again. All right, we'll click on Close. And we're set up for our networking configuration. Let's go ahead and, well, we already have the name set up. We should probably add our web server to the domain. So let's go ahead and let's add it to globalmantics.com here real quick. And we'll log in with the administrator credentials for GlobalMantics, and we'll get this guy added to the domain. And of course, when you add a machine to a domain, we'll have to do another reboot. Yes, I know. That's just the way of Microsoft servers. Make an alteration and change something and have to do a reboot. All right, welcome to the GlobalMantics domain. Okay, we will go ahead and we'll restart the machine here real quick. And then, of course, as soon as it comes back up, I'll start recording again. All right, so the machine has booted back up, and I have actually gone ahead and logged into it. Oh, you know, we should probably go ahead and set the time zone here real quick because this should be in New York. So let's go ahead and set it back over to Eastern Time. And this one does not cause a reboot, so we're good there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the ICT for the time being. Oh, you know what? We should probably do is download and install updates, but you know what? I'm going to wait to do that a little later on. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll close the ICT. That's going to bring up the server manager. I much prefer working in server manager than I do in the ICT, especially for adding roles, just because the server manager gives me a one-stop shop. So let's go ahead and let's go over here to roles, and we're going to add roles. And we're going to go ahead, we're going to have it skip this page by default because we might do a couple of role installations here. Okay, so now we've decided that we're going to install the application server, which is right here. And then over here in the description, let's just let you know that application server provides central management and hosting of high-performance distributed business applications, such as those built with enterprise services and .NET Framework 3.0. Again, remember that application servers are really all about heavy-duty business applications most of the time on the internal side. However, they can be used on the external, but most of the time you'll probably see them used inside of your network, inside of the perimeter. So now when I put a check mark here in application server, you see it's going to ask me, hey, do I want to add these features that are required for application server? Well, here we go. We have the .NET Framework, the Windows Process Activation Service, .NET Environment, Configuration, APIs. Yeah, why wouldn't we? I mean, it seems kind of silly if we don't. Now, tell you what, I'm going to cancel it for just a second there. Let me go ahead and put a check mark here in the web server, which is just IIS. Now, notice here that IIS, if I'm going to install it, it also requires me to add some features. And then, of course, we would click on Add Required Features as well. So the nice thing about some of these roles you're installing in Server 2008, you don't have to remember to install these other items because Server will remember to install them for you and won't let you install that particular role unless those features are actually also in place. All right, I'm going to go ahead and cancel this here for the time being. But I want you to see that when we add in application server like we're going to, let's go ahead and add the required features. The application server is also going to install IIS right along with everything else. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and let's tell this next here. Now there are also additional role services that we're going to be applying here. We should probably go ahead and let's go ahead and let's add web services support, and we'll add the required role services here. A lot of this other stuff, whether or not you will need it, will be determined by what application that you also will be installing. Now, with SharePoint services, which is eventually where we're going to end up, SharePoint services will take care of anything else that it really needs. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll tell it next and next. And okay, it's going to bring us to the role services for the web server, IIS. And we're going to go ahead and leave the defaults set up as they are. I do want to mention to you that whether you install the web server role or you install the application role, IIS 7 has a huge amount of additional modules that you can install, so you can really build your own web server. There's a whole lot of stuff in here. This is something that some of you might want to take note of, the IIS 6 management compatibility. So if you have old IIS websites that require IIS 6 management stuff, you can basically make your IIS 7 server backwards compatible with any stuff that is from IIS 6. Now, just so you know, we don't have to install or really worry about these. If we need to add or subtract any of them, we can do that later as well. I think it's a very cool thing with IIS 7 is that you can turn on or turn off whatever features that you feel like you might need or are required by the application that you're running. So if you're not going to be running ASP.NET pages, but you're running a web server, well, you can just turn them off right here, right now. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. We don't want to do that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to tell it next. Now this is going to tell us everything that we're going to be installing, and we're going to leave the basic core functionality of application server as it is. So we'll click here on install, and it's going to install these particular role services and features. And of course, it's going to take a while, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while it does its thing, and then as soon as it's finished, I'll come right back. All right, so here you see that our installation has succeeded. Hey, all right. We're going to go ahead and we'll click on close here now. And let's see if it asks us to reboot the machine. Hey, looks like we have escaped from that particular item. Let's go ahead and let's go into the roles section now. Here you see we have the application server role. Let's go ahead and expand it. Let's just take a quick tour of the items that we actually have installed here. We have component services, and we have the COM plus applications, DCOM config, what processes are currently running, and right now we really don't have much running because, well, we don't have any applications installed. So we'll go ahead and decrease that tree. Distributed transaction coordinator. Again, depending upon what the application you're actually going to be installing will determine what it is that you'll need on your application server. All right, let's go ahead and let's take a look at the web server here. And the web server application interface, I'm a big fan of this one. And it looks like we're only seeing the very basics of this one here. Let's go ahead and scroll down just a second. Let's take a look here in the system services. 3 running, 2 stopped. What's up with that? All right, web management service. Let's go ahead and let's turn that one on. We'll go ahead and we'll start that guy. And then, oh, there we go. All right, in ASP.NET state service, let's go ahead and start that. Always important to have all of your services running when you actually want to get something accomplished. Okay, there we go. All right, so what we have accomplished so far is we have successfully installed the web server and the application server. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and go to the Start menu here and go to Administrative Tools. I want to take you into the Internet Information Services Manager. This is really the heart of the IIS system. And by the way, it makes a lot of stuff a lot easier nowadays. I'm a huge fan of this particular interface. It's made a lot of things a whole lot easier. All right, so down here in the tree, you see application pool, okay? Let me talk to you for just a second about what an application pool is. An application pool is basically a set of set-aside resources for a particular web application. Now, depending upon the applications that you have installed, you may need to create multiple application pools for unique web applications. Now, this will probably make a little more sense once we have SharePoint services installed, which we'll do here in just a little bit. But application pools actually allow us to make sure that a particular web application has basically its own little corner of the server, if you will, if that helps you to kind of visualize it and kind of make it sense in your mind. Now over here we have sites here as well, and you see that we have a default website set up for us automatically. Now if we want to view this particular site, we have this browse website link down here. Let's go ahead and let's click on this one. It should open up into Internet Explorer here for us, and we'll see what actually is on this default website that we have installed. Looks like all we really have is a singular web page here that has some links out to the outside world of Microsoft. Okay. Now if I wanted to add files to the websites, let's go ahead and we'll click on Explorer here. And this is actually showing me the World Wide Web root folder. And here's where I would place any HTML files or PHP files or ASP files or whatever files are necessary for the website. I would put them in this particular folder. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll close that one. Now, just so you know, Internet Information Services could be its own class. Okay, so it's not my intention to teach you every single thing about IIS 7. But it is my intention to at least give you a basic overview. Most of the stuff that you're going to be doing, this is the ASP.NET stuff that is going to be required by the application server. But if I scroll down, you see I have this whole other section of IIS buttons. Okay? Now, the best thing that you could do for your certification prep is to get a copy of Server 2008, install on a virtual machine somewhere, maybe use Microsoft's free virtual server application, however you do it. But go into each one of these sections. Like here we have the authentication section. We have, let's scroll down here again. Error pages, redirects, directory browsing. You know, there's all kinds of buttons in here that you probably want to get to at least a little bit familiar with as you go along and as you start working with IIS 6. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be installing SharePoint services, right? So the thing of it is that SharePoint services is going to do a huge amount of work for us automatically during the installation process. So tell you what, now that we have set up our server so that it is ready for SharePoint services, let's go ahead and switch back over to the slides. We'll talk about what we're going to accomplish with SharePoint services. We'll come back and we'll get that done. All right, so just a couple of quick notes about SharePoint. You're probably already familiar with it because it's growing in popularity at a rather alarming rate. But now that the app server is installed, I need you to understand that SharePoint Services is a free, separate download from Microsoft. So we're going to have to go out to Microsoft's website and get that guide downloaded. Installation is really super fast and easy. I mean, there's really nothing to it, as you're going to find out. But then once we've got SharePoint Services installed, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new SharePoint site for the Globomantics operations staff. Now, once you install SharePoint, it is going to install a default SharePoint site onto your application server. That's pretty neat if you need to have a company-wide SharePoint server. But we're going to kind of drill down and create a new SharePoint site that's specifically just for the Globomantics operations staff, okay? Let's go ahead and let's bounce back on over to our server now, and let's get that set up. All right, so back over here on Web 1, I'm going to go ahead and open up Internet Explorer. And, okay, Enhanced Security Configuration is enabled. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to see how much of a pain in the neck this is going to be. We may end up turning this off. I'd really rather not because it's really not a good idea to turn off the enhanced security configuration. We're going to get a lot of these, though, on the server. It's not a bad thing in terms of making sure that you don't get hit by random drive-by downloads and whatnot. Anything from Microsoft we're probably going to be able to trust. So we'll go ahead and we'll just keep on adding it or closing it. There we go. All right, so I went to Microsoft.com/SharePoint, and let's see if we can't find SharePoint services here. And here it is, Microsoft Windows SharePoint Services. That's what we're interested in getting to. Oh man, we just keep hitting with security breaches straight from Microsoft's website. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to scroll over here, and you'll see that here is our SharePoint Services 3.0. We're going to go ahead and download it. And oh, look, content is being blocked again. All right, close, close, close. All right, that's neat. Close. All right, okay, close. Okay, so now here's what we're going to do. We're going to scroll down here. We're going to see if we can find our version. There we go. Now let's see. We need to make sure that we're getting the right SharePoint Services version. Let's go ahead and go to my computer here and let's look in the properties. And we are running a 64-bit operating system. Okay, got it. So we need to grab a Windows SharePoint Services 64-bit edition. So let's go ahead and let's do that. Should we grab this one or should we grab it with SP1? I'm thinking SP1. I like that idea. Oh, look, more security issues from Microsoft's website. That's great, guys. Okay, let's click on download now. And it's going to tell me that I'm attempting to download a file. Okay, let's add download.microsoft.com. That's a good idea. We'll add it to our trusted sites and click on close and close. And let's see if we can't get this file downloaded. Oh, look. Okay, there we go. All right, Microsoft's Download Center. We're changing. No thanks. Come on, let's go here. All right, I'm not seeing anything actually downloading at this point. So let's go ahead and let's click on the Start Download link here. There we go. That's what we wanted to see. I'm going to go ahead and save this guy. Go ahead and save this to the desktop so it's really easy to find. And we'll save this. And it looks like it is going to take a little bit of time here. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while 115 megabytes downloads. And then as soon as it's done downloading, we'll come back and install it. All right, so our download is now complete. Let's go ahead and click on Run. And we're going to go ahead and, yes, we do want to run the software. There we go. And from this point on, SharePoint Services is a pretty easy installation. I'm going to go ahead and close out of Internet Explorer here as we install these here. We'll go ahead and we'll leave our IIS services. Let's go ahead and unpin this here so it goes up. There we go. We'll leave open our Web Server Manager here. I'll go ahead and I'll minimize it though. All right, so now I need to read the Microsoft license terms. Yep, okay. I'm going to accept the terms of this agreement and tell it to continue. And here is really the most critical point that you need to pay attention to in the SharePoint Services 3.0 setup. And that is, do you want to install a single standalone or do you want to set up a server or SharePoint farm? Now, if you're going to add more servers to your SharePoint system in the future, you're going to want to go ahead and use the advanced. Globomantics is not that big of a company. We're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to click on Basic. And we're going to go ahead and install a single SharePoint site to a single server. And we'll go ahead and we'll leave it at that. Now, in the future, Globomantics might want to upgrade to SharePoint Server. Now, services and server are two different things. First of all, services is a free download. SharePoint Server, on the other hand, it costs a whole lot of dollars. So there's the biggest difference, but obviously SharePoint Server has a lot more capabilities than the services does. Now, generally speaking, you can create an external SharePoint Services website for the outside world or maybe for use as an extranet. But if you're going to do something of that caliber, you're probably going to get better results with SharePoint Server. However, for the purposes of the 7643 exam, you only really need to be semi-familiar with SharePoint Services. And since it's a free download, you can get this also installed on a box of your choosing or even a virtual machine like what I'm doing here. All right, so it's taking just a little bit longer. Okay, there we go. We're getting this guy installed. It doesn't take that long to install either, even though SharePoint Services is a very powerful little web application. Now, obviously, we're looking at SharePoint Services from a Windows 2008 standpoint, but you can download a copy of SharePoint Services 3.0 for Windows Server 2003 as well, just kind of as an aside, just so you know. And there we go. Okay, so here we are, the SharePoint Services completion box, and we're going to run the SharePoint Products and Technologies Configuration Wizard now. We'll click on Close. And this is kind of a short little configuration wizard that will take us the rest of the way through. Okay, we're going to tell it next. The following services may have to be restarted or reset. Okay, that's fine. And just so you know, I mean, if our application server was not installed or if there were any missing pieces for the configuration, the SharePoint installation package would actually tell us what needed to be installed. Alright, so this is a pretty typical installation procedure and configuration from here on out. Basically what happened was we installed the package, and now it is creating the configuration database, creating our basic site, and all of the little nuances that go along with SharePoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video yet again and go ahead and let this thing do what it will, and then as soon as it's done configuring its configurators, then we'll be back and I'll take you to the next step. Alright, so the configuration was successful here. Let's go and scroll this down just a touch, and tells us to click Finish to close the wizard and navigate to the default SharePoint web application homepage. Internet Explorers may be prompted for a username in the form domain/username and password access to access the site. At the prompt, enter the credentials used to log on to this computer. Add this site to the list of trusted sites when prompted. Okay, let's hit Finish. Here's the deal. Your SharePoint site is actually connected directly to your Active Directory infrastructure. Alright, so any users that we may want to have access to SharePoint, we're going to have to add them both to Active Directory and also, here we go. And we'll go ahead and we'll log in here as the administrator. And by the way, I'm logging in as the local administrator for this particular machine. And our new SharePoint site should pop up here. And there we go. So you see that we have SharePoint successfully installed. Now we do want to go ahead and create a new SharePoint site really quick for our operations staff. All right, so let's go ahead and go to Site Actions. Now SharePoint is a really easy web application to use and to manage, so it really won't take you much learning. If you want to get into the advanced features, that does take a little bit of time, and of course there's some SharePoint training out there by me. So anyway, let's go ahead and we'll create the Global Mantics Ops team sites. Team site and description. This is just for the ops team. And then we're going to create a URL specifically for this particular sub-site, and we're just going to call it simply ops. And we have a variety of templates that we can utilize. We're going to stick with the team site for right now. And for the time being, we'll leave the user permissions as they are, and the navigations, everything else is going to be A-OK, and we'll click on Create. And it does take just a little bit for it to spin up and create the site for us. While it's doing that, I want to go back over here to the IIS Management Console real quick. I want to take you through some things that have happened since we've installed our SharePoint site. Oh, there it is. All right. It's already been created for us. And from here on out, we can start adding and working with this particular site. Come on, let's get up to the IIS Manager. Here we go. All right. I'm going to come over here and click on View Application Pools, and let's see what kind of application pools that we have. Now, each one of these items, there's a SharePoint Central Administration application pool. This is a set-aside amount of resources that allows basically dedicated access only for this one particular web application. Here is the SharePoint site itself, SharePoint-80. So that's all about basically isolating the processes for our main SharePoint site, okay? Now, as you create additional SharePoint sites, it's a really good idea to create additional application pools. And by the way, you can do that right here. As you see, it's really super easy. All we have to really do in order to add an application pool for a particular application like SharePoint, or maybe some other application that requires its own separate, dedicated, isolated set of resources, we can just click on here on Add Application Pool. and we just give it a name and we tell it okay. I mean, there's really not much to it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cancel this guy out here real quick because we don't need to create a new application pool at this point in time. Now, when do you need to create a new application pool? Basically, whenever an application you're installing tells you you need to install a new app or create a new application pool, that's when you do it. Or if you're working with a custom developed application and the developer that you're working with says, hey, you know what, I'm probably going to need a new application pool for this particular program, you go ahead and create one. It's kind of a no-brainer, you know, whenever the situation calls for it, the application calls for it, or the web developer calls for it, that's when you make it happen. Now, can you run multiple applications inside of the same application pool? Yes, you can. However, when applications, specifically web applications, start dragging or running really slowly, then it might be a really good idea to create a new application pool for that app so that it has its own isolated set of resources, okay? All right, so we're good for that. I just wanted to give you a quick look at the application pools. Let's go over here to the site section here real quick. And you see that SharePoint has actually created its own websites for you. You didn't have to create these at all. These were created during the configuration process, not the installation process, mind you, but the configuration process. And that was that second wizard that we walked through. So actually here is our main SharePoint site, and there's also a central administration website for SharePoint itself. And by the way, we could actually go to that particular website here real quick. Right over here you see where it says browse website. I'm going to go ahead and click here and browse for this particular site, and it should open up here for me. There we go. Notice it says localhost 14453. This is the port number that this particular website runs under. Every time you create a brand new SharePoint installation, this number is going to be randomly generated, okay? Just want you to keep that in mind. All right, let's go ahead and log in here as the local administrator again. And by the way, if we wanted to have other people have access to our SharePoint sites, we'd actually have to give them access from inside of SharePoint, and that access is based upon Active Directory user accounts and logins, all right? Well, while this guy is booting up, let's bounce back on over to Globomantics, and let's talk about that here for just a second. I'm going to go back over to the top level website, which is just web1.globo. There we go. And I'm going to real quickly give access to everyone who is part of the Globomantics empire. I'm going to go to Site Actions right here, Site Settings, and we're going to get into the administration interface just a little bit. And by the way, if you're not an administrator or if you do not have full control, this little button won't be there. You know, when you grant access to your users, they won't have that Site Actions button. Let's go to People and Groups here real quick. And right now you see that there is, well, nobody available here. So let's go ahead and let's add users from this little new button here. Let's find our, oh, you know what? Let's skip that altogether. What am I doing? Let's just use the add all authenticated users link. Hey, how about that, huh? There we go. All right, so now all of our Globomantics users will be able to have access to this particular team site. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here, and I'm going to go ahead and tell this one OK, so that our users will be able to have contribution access, and that basically just allows them to actually interact with the website as you, the administrator, set that up. Now, we probably should do the same thing for our ops team website here, although really, what we really should have for our operations side team is we really should have a group specifically for the operations users, all right? Now, right now, all of the authenticated users have access to this particular group, so what we really should do is we should go back to Active Directory, figure out what our group is for the operations users, and if there isn't one, we should create it, and then we should go ahead and we can add them here. Now, this is not a SharePoint course. Just wanted to give you just a brief introduction of what it is that we actually did install here. So let's go ahead and let's go back over to our central administration. Just want to show this to you too real quick. In the central administration, this is really the administrator's back office, if you will. There's all kinds of basic administrator tasks that you'll want to walk through as soon as you have set up your SharePoint site. And you see it gives them to you real quick, real easy. A lot of them, when you click right on a link, it will take you directly to the particular section that we need to configure. Just as such, I mean, it's a very simplistic system to use, and it's gaining in popularity all over. So if you have not yet been involved with SharePoint, either on the usage side or even on the administration and installation side, chances are you will, because you saw that the SharePoint services, at the very least, is a free download. Now, SharePoint Server, remember, is a lot more powerful, and it costs a whole lot more money. This is just something that you need to be aware of, that is out there, and that it's easy to work with. A lot of the stuff, it works right out of the box in a very intuitive fashion. All right, so now that you've seen that our SharePoint site is operational, go ahead and we'll close that. And by the way, now that it is operational, any one of our authenticated users group from our Active Directory in Globomantics will be able to access this website as long as they know where it's at. I'm going to go ahead and here in IIS, I'm going to go into the SharePoint site, and the website, as you probably have already realized, is http://web1-globo. That's the name of the machine. And SharePoint actually configured itself as such during that configuration process. So you didn't have to do much with it. All we would have to do now is basically just send a quick email out to all of our users and tell them what that URL is. Now, we don't want to give them the URL for the SharePoint Central Administration website. That's for us only as administrators. This, the SharePoint site that we created, that's what we want to direct them to. All right, so the next question you're probably asking is, how do I create another new website? Well, it's pretty easy. We just go over here to Sites, right-click, and select Add Website. Or, if you don't want to right-click, you can just click right on the Sites folder. Over here underneath Actions, we have Add Website. Let's go ahead and click on that. Let me just show this to you real quickly. We could go ahead and we could create a site name here. Let's call this Globo Intranet. All right. Maybe there's a site that we'll want to create later on. Now you notice here that it creates for us an application pool automatically. Isn't that kind of nifty? Now we could select another application pool if we wanted to. We do not want to select any currently used application pools by SharePoint applications, so we don't want to select these. Remember that an application pool is a dedicated set of resources that we isolate only for the use for that one particular website or web application, okay? So if we're going to create a Globo intranet site for whatever it is that we're going to wrestle, then we're going to either want to select an application pool that is not being used or used lightly, or just create a brand new one. And by the way, there's no reason not to create a brand new one, all right? All right, now physical path, let's click on the little builder dots over here, our little ellipses. This actually allows us to select what file folder our new website is going to go into. Generally speaking, your new websites are always going to go into inetpub, all right? Don't try to put them in any other weird place. I mean, I suppose you can if you want to, but I generally recommend just leave them in inetpub. And you can also put them underneath the www root too as well if you like. So we'll go ahead and we'll put it in there, and we'll make a new folder here, and we'll call this Globo Intranet. And we'll tell it OK. So now we've told it what file folder we want basically our website files to go live in, our HTML files or ASP pages or PHP pages or whatever they happen to be. Now, if we need to have all of our users connect as a particular user, we could click on Connect As, and maybe we create a basic specific user that we want them to utilize. Most of the time, you're probably not going to want to wrestle that unless the web application is a secure, high-level, confidential, top-secret kind of thing. All right, we're going to go ahead and primarily use the application user, which provides pass-through authentication. So that means that our users will connect to that website as their own user accounts. Okay, so there's no specific or new service account necessary. All right, now what kind of binder do we want? Do we want HTTP or HTTPS? Well, HTTPS requires a security certificate. We're not going to deal with that just yet. We're going to leave it as HTTP. And if we want to allow it to use an IP address specifically, we could do that here. You can always just leave it as all unassigned to and port 80. That's A-OK. And now for the host name, we're going to specify what it is that our site is going to be named. So we're going to just call it Globo Intranet. And we'll tell it OK. So see, adding a website is really pretty easy. Now that we've created it, we need to actually start this website. So I'm going to go down here and click on Start. All right, there we go. All right, so now what we're actually able to do is we're actually able to go ahead and go into the Explorer side, and we can go into our Global Intranet item here. Let's go ahead and select New. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new text document, and we're going to call this guy index.html. I'm just going to edit this guy here real quick, and we'll say this website is under construction. There we go. So just in case someone does come to the site on accident, well, it'll say something. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll close that. Now, most of the time what we would do is we'd actually take pages that we've created in other applications and upload them here, paste them in, or move them off in from another directory, or however we have HTML files we need to wrestle, we would move them over to that. All right, so we do, in fact, have a functioning SharePoint site. You've seen how to add a brand new website. You've also even seen how to wrestle application pools too, at least a little bit. Now, application pools, like I said, you are going to create them if you need them. And how will you know if you need them? Well, it depends on what it is that you're accomplishing, and it's never going to hurt you. All right, I'll just let you know right up front. It's never really going to hurt you to have a new application pool for a new website, especially if you're creating new SharePoint websites as well. All right, so we've accomplished our goal here. Let's go ahead. I'm going to close out of Internet Explorer Manager here. Let's go back on over to our slides and let's do some wrap up, okay? All right, so here are some important words in terms of what to remember. A web server is basically a server role that installs IIS 7 only, okay? It's great for basic and dynamic websites, both internal and external. An application server, though, remember that this not only installs IIS 7, but also a lot of other heavy-duty applications and components that support what we call distributed applications like SharePoint. Distributed applications in our particular context really means heavy-duty websites that are very dynamic and the users have a lot of interaction with. Application servers, by the way, can do a lot more than just do websites too. There are a lot of network applications out there that require the use of an application server. An application pool, I think I beat this horse enough, a set aside amount of resources specifically for one particular website or one web application. And then SharePoint Services is a free web application. It's available as a separate download from Microsoft that promotes collaboration through SharePoint sites. There's our critical vocabulary. After viewing this video, you should be able to install the web server and application server roles to your Server 2008. You should be able to at least beginning to navigate the IIS 7 manager. I know there's a lot of buttons that we didn't go into. IIS 7 really deserves its own course, all right? And we're really focusing on what it is that we need to deal with in terms of the 7643 exam. But there's a lot more to it than just what I've covered. So again, what you really want to do is you want to download a copy of Server 2008, get it installed, and punch around and play with it on a test server or maybe a virtual machine. I've shown you how to create a new website and also shown you how to create application pools. And last but not least, this one is a no-brainer. You should be able to install SharePoint services so that everyone in your organization can access a SharePoint site and have it available for use for collaboration. And what we found out in this video is that it's really not that hard. once you have the application server role intact, download SharePoint, install it, and it's pretty much ready to go out of the box. You just have to make sure that your employees know how and where to find it. We've wrapped this one up. Let's go ahead and let's move on to the next video.